everybody's got the handouts back there? Both of them?
Which one?
I think one says maples, one says maples for containers. There's your light nighttime reading tonight for the nightstand, right? That's a little less than we usually are. So thanks for coming down. Who's new to classes here today? We got a few? New maples, new to classes. There you go. Well, this is one of my permanent addictions that started many, many years ago. I usually call Acer palmatum itis, the addiction to all things Japanese maple. So if you're like me, there's always room for just one more somewhere. I'm sure my wife's going to be super psyched when I bring home 3 more that I just got this week that I'll wait till she's teaching school this week and sneak them in the house on Wednesday when I'm home. So, which means I have to buy 3 more pots, which is just a bummer too. So I'm right there with you. If you love maples, I'm right there with you. There's always something kind of fun to try. We can tuck a maple just about anywhere in the yard if we get the right tree for the right spot. So that's what we're here today, is to kind of teach you a little bit, some choices. You can see the variety of colors. I typically bring 300 in here so you can see the stage. I've only brought up maybe 50 today. So we do have quite a bit more than this out there. And I always say, just because I didn't bring it in here doesn't mean I don't like it. I don't think there's not one maple here I would dislike, to be honest with you. So there's some pretty cool colors up here if you look up though. This is kind of spring. I think a lot of people think Japanese maples fall color. Every single one of them is going to get great fall color, but I treat this as the tree of all seasons. So I'm always going to get good fall color. But what do I have to look at spring? What do I have to look at in summer? And what do I have to look at in the winter time? So we have some with bark interest for winter. I think all of them are pretty in the winter anyway. Pretty structured, nice silhouettes. But certainly spring, you can see some unbelievable colors coming out here as they're leafing out here for 2024. So hopefully you'll find something you like today. So we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. If you can, just wait till the end. I'm here all day, so if you want to stand here and ask me questions about maples till 5, my day will go by very quickly, just like that. No, I'm just kidding. So everybody's got the handout here. We'll kind of follow this. I decided not to do the slideshow TVs today because I think this is more fun looking at live trees for a change, since we have almost all of them in. You know, again, look at what you have to choose from. You're going to see a lot of different choices up here, and as you go out shopping after class, we're going to see stuff that's small, miniature. We're going to see Laceleafs, you know, little weeping specimens. We're going to have reticulated maples, and when I talk about reticulated, it's that. Can you see, everybody see that leaf? So I've got that venation pattern on there where I've got really cool colors going. And then we frankly just have variegated maples where I'm going to see more of an irregular splash of pink or white or different tones as well. So you'll see some really cool choices around here as they're leafing out for spring. And frankly, most of these will look totally different as we get into the summer, and then again, totally different as we get in towards the fall color time as well, okay? So the biggest thing, if I'm choosing to pick one, is going to be sun. You know, there's one thing that we need to worry about is how much sun is your tree going to get. So some people come to me and say, oh, you know, it's part sun, part shade. Well, when is the sun, when is the shade? Because it's going to be a huge importance of this particular plant. If we have morning sun, or if we have afternoon sun, or if we have that typical northwest kind of dappled shade through the whole day. All the maples make great understory trees. So if I have old evergreens or some room, things are limbed up, I can use these underneath that as a secondary canopy, and they'll be spectacular. If I have the opposite, where I'm going out into all afternoon sun, I've got to be a little more careful which ones I choose so we don't get tired in the summertime. And then we have a lot of other options that if we had deep dark shade or just a little bit of filtered light or morning sun only, now we can do a lot of the reticulated ones, some variegation, and I think some of the more fun colors in those spots as well, okay? So we'll do a little bit of sun is always number one. Now, the biggest thing with maple, period, is drainage. Drainage, 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 drainage. There's one kiss of death for all maple trees, and that would be too much water. So whether we're talking in a pot or we're talking the ground, that is the one thing we cannot do, is get too much water on the root system. The problem here, everybody's got different water table level in your yard. You know, when you have clay, you're shaking your head like, yeah, I got some of that going, I do too. When that water table collects in the wintertime and we get up onto the root system, verticillium fungus is going to attack the root system, you're going to lose your tree. There's no cure, there's no spray, there's no fix of any kind for that. So be careful where you plant them. I would always dig a massive hole for maple and make sure that we don't have that hard pan down underneath there. If we have suffering drainage, it might not be for 1 year or 3 years or 5 years, and the worst case is 10 or 15 years. I finally have my gorgeous specimen getting to maturity, and then it crashes. So I just talked to a friend last night while I was at the Mariners game, texted me a picture like, dude, what's wrong with my tree? Huge trunk, been there for years. I know when they put it in, a third of it's gone. And I said, I hate to tell you this, you got verticillium wilt. I can see it already on some of that branches, and it's gonna die, and then another chunk will die. That tree will have to come out and will have to go away. So for me, I know I wasted, I think, 500 bucks when I bought my house in Everett. I wanted a coral bark maple outside my kitchen window so bad I could taste it. So 200 bucks 1 year, verticillium. Dug a bigger hole, broke up the clay, another 200 bucks. Next year, done again. So I gave up finally after 3 strikes. I'm out and said I'll put something else in there. So there's a lot of good trees we can grow that maybe have a heavier soil or have verticillium resistance, like dogwood's what I chose. There's a bunch of other good ones too. But if you've had that in a spot, we do not want to grow maples in there again. That's just, you're taking the chance of this happening over and over and over again. So unless we get the water out of there, berm it up, create a raised area where we can grow it a little bit higher and drier, maybe you're okay, but I probably wouldn't take a chance because I tried all that in my spot in Everett, okay? So drainage is number one. You'll see on that sheet there, just kind of talking a little bit about kind of brooming up your area, making sure you do have some good drainage. And then again, I think it highlights the tree too. Most of my yard is not on anthills, but raised up on mounds and berms. You get kind of more of a little three-dimensional yard, a little more texture, and you can layer a little bit as you design your landscape as well, okay? So you'll see in the disease right there, the two main things, verticillium wilt, we deal with drainage. The other one I have on there is Pseudomonas. So anyone sees black on their maple, if I go through a traditional winter here in our climate, not a lot of people, I don't see it a lot on mine, maybe I'm lucky. But normal dieback is going to be beige or gray. If we have dead wood in the center of our tree, that's not uncommon. That means it's been shaded out, it's older growth. We simply break that out or prune it out, remove it once a year, and we've got a brand new specimen. If that's gone black, or I have black tips that you can see traveling through, that needs to get pruned out immediately. Pseudomonas is a bacterial infection. Typically gets into coral bark quite a bit, but it really can get on most any maples. Again, it's probably a little too wet, but that's a branch problem that if I could prune it out in time, it'll regrow. I can spray with some copper, would be a great solution for that, and then I'll be okay. If you're worried about getting it, especially if you have a coral bark, I might suggest getting on maybe one time a winter towards late winter, maybe get on a little dormant spray with copper. That would really help protect your tree in the wet spring, as we probably see that problem progress, okay? So we try to watch ours very carefully as they come in, because this is something that no maple's immune to, but it is something that is correctable. Unlike the verticillium, we have to kind of play taps and say goodbye to our tree and the great compost heap in the sky kind of thing, okay? So those are the main two ones. I don't get a lot of insect issues for some reason this year. We've had quite a few people call. Maybe the aphids are a little hungrier here coming out of winter, but I've had a lot of people call, so their new growth is covered with aphids. So that's not the end of the world, but we do want to correct that pretty quickly. Aphids will go from 10 to 10 billion pretty quickly if we do not correct the problem. So we want to spray, and my rule for spraying maples, you got to be very careful what we apply on Japanese maples. If it's listed for vegetable use, typically we are okay to use it on a maple tree. We're not doing any oils. It's typically insecticidal soap, something very mild that will take care of the problem, but also not burn the tree. If we apply a typical insecticide or anything systemic to a maple, you don't have to go that heavy, and you would burn your tree. It would look a little worse than it did before with the bug damage, okay? So always ask if you're not sure, is this okay to use on a maple? And that way we just don't have any damage on it, okay? Now, growing maples in pots, you'll see I brought that extra little sheet in just kind of specifically on containers. I know that's how I feed my addiction these days, because I'm out of room in the garden. I'm not going to cut any of mine down and plant a new one because they're all looking good. So it's all, I get to buy a new tree and a new pot. I'm sorry, honey, but I have 3 more this week, right? So everybody's always got empty pots behind the house. That's an easy one. I think I always have a few that don't have something in them. But we can always grow some really nice maples in pots. My rule for me, I'm always trying to get 10 years out of it, to be honest. I'm not looking for a year or two. Sometimes that's fine for some folks. But I'm looking to get a really good sized container and the appropriate tree in there so that I can enjoy it for 7, 8, 9, 10 years and not have to do this over and over again. It certainly isn't a problem if I go halfway with the pot 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Now I go to my bigger one and then I'm good for the rest of that time as well. But if I'm going to do them in pots, I'm going to be very careful which ones I choose. You know, a lot of times I could pick any maple and I can grow any plant in a pot, right? I mean, we can all admit that. I can pick anything out here in the nursery and grow it in a pot for a while and it'll be happy. But how long is it going to last? How big does it get? Is it going to outgrow that container a little quicker? So we got a lot of cool maples I'll show you when we start going through trees that would be perfect for containers. We can use them in the yard, have a smaller specimen, or grow them in a container for a longer period and not have them outgrow that space. So you'll see quite a few up like that here today, but certainly there's a whole bunch more out there to choose from as well if you're looking for a container. As you read that list, it's going to give you quite a few tips, you know, kind of on some things that I would think about when I'm doing them in containers permanently. You know, again, the sun is a big thing with that. So we want to make sure we watch the sun, the shade, and get the right plant in the right place again so we don't burn it or have too much shade and lose the color is the other end of that as well. We're going to look for a frost-proof pot. You know, I'm not a terracotta is going to disintegrate here in the winter. Plastic is not the end of the world. Maybe not the prettiest thing. You know, it's totally up to you. It's your yard. But I'm always looking for a cool, frost-proof, glazed, heavy-duty container that I will have forever. You know, and I could use it again and again for other things down the road that I don't have to worry about cracking or freezing over the winter months. Then I can also play with the color. You know, I got this color tree. Ooh, that would look sweet with this color pot. And you can kind of play that game as well a little bit too. Always use an organic potting soil mix. You got to do me a favor, and I'm not going to rip on Miracle Grow or Costco in particular, but do not buy Miracle Grow soil at Costco and plant your maple in it. If you do, you're going to be coming back to me in a year and saying, what's wrong with my tree? It's too wet, because it holds too much water. So flowers, do what you want to do, but get something way better drained than that Miracle Grow, moisture control, Miracle Grow anything. I see everybody buying at Costco. I would say 50 times already this year. We've had a customer come in, bought that soil, used it in a pot, plant died. Shrub, tree, not flowers, shrub and tree. And then we play 20 questions, like, you know what, let me ask you something. What soil did you use and where did you get it? And every single time it is the Miracle Grow soil sold at Costco. So I'm not going to rip Costco, but don't do it for your maple because it's going to be too wet and you're going to struggle your trees that way. So get Edna's Best here, or a good organic potting soil that drains well. Doesn't hold that much moisture, but drains very well. We can always add a little bark in there if we want to. That will help, like an orchid bark if you want to open up a little more root space. But that potting soil will be fine. It's exactly what I use in my pots. The only thing I might do is take compost and mix maybe a quarter compost with that potting soil. And I always, for sure, the top of that pot's going to have an inch or two of pure compost as a nice mulch over the top. That'll help me with water. I think it looks a little nicer sometimes on the potting soil. Then I can go back and plant some other things around it if I wanted to as well. Okay? So is that making sense? Everybody's going to raise their right hand. Say, I'm not going to use moisture control potting soil for my maple tree. Because I don't want anybody disappointed. And the soil's a huge part of this, whether it's the ground or in a container especially as well. Okay? So make sure the drainage in that pot is okay. This is something I fight in my yard. You know, maples don't have to be set in pots on the porch or concrete or the deck. I have all those actually already, but I use a lot in my garden. So it's like, you know what would look really cool back there is a big blue cobalt pot with a nice foliage maple behind my perennials. And I don't have to plant it in the ground. I can use that pot almost as an art piece or a little focal point and enjoy the tree that I want in there and keep it contained a little bit more. So if I'm going to do that, we got to make sure that thing's levitated a little bit, because I do this all the time, and 5 years later I'm like, that tree's not moving. Oh, the root went right down the drain hole and now it's in my yard. So I got to clean it up and drill it out and fix it and then get it back up on rocks. So I use a lot of rocks little rim of rocks that you don't even see. If we're on a hard surface, we would get pot risers. Those little recycled rubber squares are very cheap and a great way to make sure that's levitated. You can hardly even tell they're off the ground. Pot feet, we have all kinds of fun kind of different ones over there too. But just look at that container, make sure I've got adequate holes, number one. Make sure the drain, sometimes even a little mesh screen over that bottom hole before you fill it will help. No gravel, no rock, don't do any of that at the base. That does not help you, believe it or not. But we screen it, we fill it full of soil all the way. If we're trying to grow a maple tree in a container, we're not gonna use filler and just put the topsoil in. We want the whole container full of soil, so I've got all that extra space for root system, okay? Because I know with flowers, sometimes it's like, you know, that's a huge pile. I could just fill the bottom or put a riser in there to hold the soil and just put that much soil in instead of that much, if that makes sense. Flowers, fine. We want soil all the way to the bottom for a permanent tree like a maple, okay? So for me, again, I select companion plants. You know, again, we can water the maple in the container pretty regularly. It's not gonna get overwatered if we have the proper soil. But if most of mine will have heucheras, some flowers, a little bit of perennials around it, whatever I want to add to that container. I just wanna make sure I'm not picking things that need too much water, or conversely, usually they don't like water very often at all, and I got to keep my maple happy, so I water 3 times a week. While maple's happy, everything else is crashing because it's too wet, if that makes sense. So we want to always go like with like. I got a shady pot, beautiful peaches and cream sitting in it, really enjoying it. I'm going to put some flowers and things around it. I'm going to go towards shady perennials, impatiens, begonias, other things that like shade like that plant. So all the plants will be kind of happy together that way, okay? Like I said, you can pretty much grow any maple in a container. If you kind of look at that list, and there's more than that, but I put quite a few on there. You'll see a list there for hot afternoon sun, a list for morning sun, part shade, and a few that you could consider if you have total shade. That list isn't confined to that. That's a few that I throw on there every year. If you look on our website or our maple list, which is always posted there at the Maple House, or on our website, I'll mark with a little asterisk all the ones I think are really good for pots if you're looking, again, for a smaller structure plant that we can grow in there for quite a while, okay? Now, if we get back to regular maples, I'm going to kind of show you a few here, but if you look at those groups, you know, I kind of break it out. We have laceleafs, we have shrubs, we have uprights, we have full moons, maples for shade, and then the Pacific Rim collection. So I'm going to kind of touch on those, and then I'm going to whip through here and show you a few of the faves I brought in here today. So everyone knows when we talk about laceleaf maples, right? When we're kind of talking, we've got that tree that kind of comes up and weeps back down. A really cool specimen piece for the yard. This is a really common thing we get asked. Well, I'm looking for that laceleaf that just grows like 2 feet tall and like 3 feet wide and never gets any bigger than that. There are some, like baby lace, I just got in yesterday, we've been waiting for it. You want a miniature one, go get one of those, okay? The other one would be Scarlet Princess. Those are the only two that I probably could say you could keep at 3 feet or less and in a small area. Every other lace leaf is going to continue to grow on itself and develop height. Yes, I can always prune and keep it lower, but now I'm going wider. So I don't think most gardeners that I talk to have an issue with this. It's the spread. You know, they try to put one in a little 3-foot circle because they buy a small one in their yard and they've got great plants around it. 5 years later, they're like, well, now what do I do? Because it's burying my plants. We got to move that tree or get rid of those side plants, because if you start butchering our lace leaf every season, it's not going to give you the result that you would want. So those, to me, they're super expensive for old ones. I've seen lace leaves go out from wholesalers for like $20,000 before that are old. So that's a specimen plant you should try to preserve, and I would rather leave you room that than maybe the other plants can get moved a little bit as it develops, or just get a big enough spot to grow it in the first place. So with lace leaves, we can go green. I think everyone's seen green around. Always turn pretty color in the fall. We can do all kinds of purples and reds, right? And then we have all kinds of ones in between. So like for me, I brought up the one on the front here. You can see that's one called Orangeola. And we try to find, we have red, we have green back there, there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm always trying to find ones that are both. You know, I like the way leaves out a different color, I get a different color in summer, a different color in fall. So if you like foliage color change, look for some of the other ones out there, because there's quite a few. I can pick one up here. There's quite a few. I think I can reach it.
Oh, yeah.
There we go. So there's quite a few that would give you that option as far as some different colors. If I was out here in June and looked at this, I would literally see an orangey red tip growth with more green in the summer. Fall color, back to the orange, red, get a little bit of everything. And this is one that tends to have maybe a little more character if you're looking for an art piece. That would sprawl out and kind of curve a little bit more, maybe than some other ones that are like little umbrellas, okay? Here, I'll move him down. So lace leaves, the one thing we probably passed the time, who pruned their lace leaf this winter? I did, I always hit mine. So if you haven't, you're gonna have a tough time doing it now. If you've seen them leaf out, what happens? They leaf out and you're like, well, where do I even start? Because you can't see in them. So that's one thing we have to get done in the winter. We can always go back and touch up an upright maple during the growing season. I a lot of times thin mine in the summertime if they need a little thinning, but lace leaf's gotta be done in the winter. It's so easy to walk out. You'll find one sunny day sometime in January, February, you climb underneath that thing and you can get all that light colored wood broken out. And a lot of times if you haven't done that, you get rid of that dead wood out of there, then you stand back and go, wow, my problem's fixed right now. Now it's more open, it's more airy, and you've got the structure that you want. So it's not the beige or the gray again. Those are totally normal colors to die back naturally, all the undergrowth there, because it's been buried by the next level. But we can watch for the black, just in case we might have some pseudomonas, and we can certainly tidy that plant up for the whole season. Right now, you know, they're growing out, they're gonna go down and hit the ground. So like for me, you know, I've got nice lawn, I've got a big old maple I've had for years right there by the garage. I'm not gonna dig up 6 inches of my lawn every year, so I don't have any grass left. The grass is staying, so that maple can just be pruned up a little bit and then it grows back down. It gets pruned up a little bit and it grows back down. So it doesn't ever look butchered. I'm not taking my chainsaw on the stick, you know, and doing it that way, but we're pulling up the branches a little bit so that we just regrow in that same pattern and it looks natural that way, okay? So that maybe could be done still if you have it, but if not, you know, you can temporarily kind of do it, but then just make sure next winter we dive in there and we get that maple cleaned up properly, okay? Now upright tree, or the shrub maples, we're gonna have quite a few. Now that's another category that's probably a little bushier. I'm not looking for that open kind of airy habit, but I want a twiggier plant. If we look at something like, can you see the red ones up here? Like that's Elizabeth, or this is Makawa, Yatsubusa, or this is the one called Rhode Island Red. There's a few others up here that would be a little twiggier and a little thicker plants, which is great. All kinds of color choices again, but I'm just not gonna get quite as big. So something I'm probably not gonna have to maybe thin out as much if I don't want to. I'm gonna have probably a little twiggier, thicker plant that way. There's some for shade, some for sun. We certainly have some options out there for good shrub varieties as well. Now, upright trees, you can see some of the questions that I would ask myself there. Something big and bushy. Am I trying to block the neighbor? You know, do I like, you know what, I don't need to look at that trash pile all summer. I want the biggest, bushiest, fullest one you got. Sweet, that's a great spot for that. I'm up by the front door. Do I probably want the biggest, bushiest one in the house? No, because I'll have to prune it. I would rather have something upright, maybe vase-shaped, that I can walk underneath. Maybe next to a path would be the same way. Or we were talking before class about columnar. You know, there's no Japanese maple that grows like a telephone pole, but there are, you know, thinner ones for spread. So like me, I want some red over here. There's my Japanese maple spot 20 years ago. What can I plant just 6 feet from my garage and my gutter line that won't get into my house and it won't make a mess on my roof and all the rest of it? So I chose this one, Twombly's Red Sentinel, years ago, and it's beautiful in my yard still, you know, 20 years later. So there are some narrower ones, but it's typically going to be, you know, kind of vase shaped like that, where I'm a little bigger towards the top, but I have the room down below to still walk underneath it or have other plants at the base, if that makes sense, okay? So ask yourself that, vase shape, you know, am I looking for a particular fall color? Privacy, do I want to create shade? I think a lot of people with smaller yards now are like, you know what, I don't need 30 or 40 feet tall and wide with a red maple, like a red sunset or one of the big shade tree type maples, but I'd like a little shade in the summer on a manageable sized tree. That's Japanese maple. You know, we go for larger growers like coral barks or Tobioshos or blood goods or different colors again that might reach 20 feet tall, you know, half the size of one of the larger shade trees. So a little more manageable again in size, but still going to give me a little bit of shade in the summertime on the lawn or the garden kind of thing, okay? So there's quite a bit to choose, and we've got a lot of uprights out there, and they're all over the property. That's going to be the hard thing on class breaks out here is shopping. Ask staff or ask me and I'll help you find it. But we have maples over the entire property. They're on display out here, they're there, they're shade, they're the walkway. Then we have a vast majority in kind of our newer maple house up there as well, okay? So the next one there's full moon maples. Does anyone know full moon maple? So this is a little different. Everything we talked about so far I've shown you is what we would call Acer palmatum, you know, kind of traditional Japanese maple. We don't have to learn Latin today, don't worry. So when we talk full moon maples, we're talking about a little different species, okay? So we have Japonicums. I don't know if I brought one in here. Oh, this one, Emmett's. So this is an Acer Japonicum called Emmett's Pumpkin. Now that would be a beautiful shade tree sized maple with great color on it. I have a different species of that in my front yard. Much bigger leaves. You can see the flower when it blooms is much more noticeable on those. And they've got spectacular fall color. If I have a Japonicum type maple, I'm not looking for red or orange or yellow or purple. I'm looking for all of it. So when my tree turns, I'm looking out there in the fall and I'm like, that is sweet, because I have every shade in the fall color rainbow as that progresses through the growth. So I have one of those that's certainly maybe a little bigger grower for some. We do have some smaller, even weeping ones of those. But that's one pretty spring color, nice green foliage in the summer, but that's especially about the fall to me. That's got probably the superior fall color to most of the maples we'll talk about in the class today. The other one is Shirawasawanum. That's a hard one to say, but that's our other traditional full moon maple. Most folks that go that route, do anyone know golden full moon maple? So I brought a little seedling, we have bigger ones. But this is gonna look maybe a little more like our native vine maple as far as the leaf size, but I get some different colors on that. And that's the one I have to do in shade. This is not one I'm gonna put out in sun on the golden. I'm gonna grow that in very little sun, or it's the perfect understory tree because it glows golden lime color the entire season and then turns red orange for fall. Really nice fall color too. So super slow growing, very manageable in size, but definitely for shade. So that's golden full moon. We would also have like autumn moon. If I wanted like gold lime to orange, I can have a little bit more sun on that. And then we would also have moonrise, which would be golden, yellow, orange to bright ruby red on the new tips. And that we can even have a little more sun on. So this one, never in afternoon sun. The other two, as long as you were careful probably where and how long, you could get away with a little bit more sun on those other types of full moon maples as well. But certainly just something I always bring them up because it's something to consider, because they look a little more native. Typically they're multi-stem, which I think looks nice in the yard and not like one trunk, you know, in the tree up on them. But certainly great, spectacular foliage, and especially when we come towards fall. The next one there, maples for shady sites. So again, I kind of brought up the word reticulated at the beginning. This is one I have on the back of my house in pure shade that's about 12 feet tall now in 20 years, called Peaches and Cream. But there's a lot of cool reticulated ones I brought up here, but everyone see that leaf is just spectacular. So this would have peachy pink new leaves. I would have that white on green here in spring. I will still see that subtle reticulation all through the summertime, and then again I get beautiful fall color. Mine turns a little bit orangey tones on Peaches and Cream, but that's an example of something we would have for shade. So I could go pretty much all shade on that, or I could go morning sun. I want zero afternoon sun on the reticulated or variegated maples, unless it's just like oh, I got shade all day until 5 o'clock in the evening in the summer and I get a little bit of late. I'm okay with that. We want to avoid that noon to 5, you know, kind of time frame when the sun's high in the sky. You're going to look great in spring, but you're going to get to August every year and go, I don't know, man, he looks tired. He's going to get a little sunburn, a little crispy, a little bit of brown on there, okay? The other one I wanted to show you, that's a long walk. Can you see the front, the pinky one right there? The arching one kind of coming over. So that's one of my favorite trees on the property. That's one we call Mikazuki, the crescent moon maple. And that, I think, is towards the top of the totem pole as far as reticulation. Right now, the color is stunning. If you go look at that thing, that's like an orchid pinky red. You can see the vein color on there. And then again, it's going to evolve in the different tones in the summer and really nice fall color again. That's not a huge grower. That might reach like 10 or 12 feet when we get full grown. But if you're trying to brighten up a morning sun or a shady garden, things like that, I think, just make a statement. You know, there's your specimen in there. We can have some nice kind of fillers and thriller plants around there, but that would be a sweet choice for a part sun. And again, a container. Both those excellent to grow in pots as well. So lots of different shady ones there. I don't think we're sold out of many. So maybe today we will, but I don't think we're sold out of many of them totally yet. If you're looking for shady and reticulated, again, ask me or ask the staff, because I have a bunch of them in our house over there where most of the maples are, but that's a particular one I use a lot for display in our shade area. So if I go walk through the shade gardens over here, I will see those all over the place leafing out with some different colors. The other one I'll show you for shade would be this. We've struggled to find what we call ukigumo, or floating cloud maple. It's been a hard one to get for a few years. We've actually got quite a few here for now. I don't know how long they'll last, and I'm kind of looking for some more. But if I want white in particular, and I've got pure shade, you're not going to beat floating cloud maple. That's a traditional Japanese one going back many, many moons. But that's going to leaf out almost pure white. And then I'll again have variegation on there as we go through the season. But I can't have any afternoon sun on that. That's one, like we have a really nice one down at the Arboretum I take care of in North Everett there at Legion. I help in the Maple Grove, and that is underneath pure Doug firs. It gets light, it's not that, but I do not have that direct sun baking on that thing, or it's going to turn brown every single August when we get warm and it's a little bit drier, okay? So if you've been waiting for floating cloud or ukigumo, we do have a couple of those ready to rock as well. Now the last one there, before I show you a few others at the table, is that Pacific Rim collection. So anybody familiar with that? So that's a pretty cool thing. One of my favorite wholesalers, Isley Nursery. We get a lot of really cool conifers from them, and a lot of Japanese maples too. They're not the cheapest place in the world, but they tend to have the superior products. They've got really well-grown things on conifers and maples. They do their own breeding these days, so they kind of made their own trees. And the Pacific Rim was kind of their new collection that started out a few years ago, and they keep adding to it that are very different. I'm going to walk around here and show you a couple, and then we can just go through the show. But if I look in the front here, can you see how orange that one is right there in the front? So that is the popular choice around here. It's one called First Flame, and that's one of their original Japanese maples in the Pacific Rim collection. So every spring I get to enjoy that. In the summertime, bright green, nice and healthy, with that color on the tip growth. And then I get to fall and I turn an orangey red too. A great tree for all seasons. That's not a miniature one. Eventually that'll be a pretty decent sized maple in the 15-foot tall, wide, a little bit taller than that down the roadside. So it's a good sized tree, but the color, I have nothing that's that color in the spring. I got a lot of friends of all schools that are Oregon State beavers, and all of them have bought one of those because they call it their beaver tree. It looks like the dark orange beaver color. So that is a really cool, so you're into spring foliage. I like orange anyway, but that's towards the top of the totem pole as far as spring color. Right down beneath it here is a newer one called Origami. That was one that brought out a couple years ago, the little green one. And they call it origami. You'll see it in the summer, but the leaves look like little paper origami cranes. I can't tell you how. I was like, no way. And it first one came in, and I'm like, it does kind of look like they folded those leaves up into cool textures. So that's a smaller plant, not going to get nearly as big, a little bit bushier container again, or a smaller landscape. We can take more sun on that one as well. Both those can take sun, but that's one we would be a little bit smaller, but a really interesting texture. That's a little different than some. You'll see other ones out there, again, that kind of are different maples. We get one called Ice Dragon. It's got a great name, but that's a laceleaf maple on steroids. So I want a cool laceleaf maple with great bark color, beautiful spring growth. They're just leafing out right now with some color, but I want a laceleaf that's going to grow like 8 feet tall, 10 feet wide as a specimen. So another laceleaf, a little bit larger grower. And then the other one out is Cascadia, which I have one down in the Arboretum as well. We put in a few years ago. And that looks like a laceleaf, but it's not a laceleaf. So it kind of has that same structure, maybe 8 feet tall when it gets old, a little bit wider. And it kind of weeps, but it doesn't. It kind of just goes like this and hangs on the edges. And it's not a lacy foliage, looks like a regular maple. And that thing lights up in the fall. That's again towards the top of the totem pole when we talk about fall colors. So you can always stop down at Lead on One Nowhere, Evergreen Arboretum and Gardens there at Legion Park in Everett. We have a maple collection down there. We all volunteer to kind of help them take care of that park. There's quite a few of these in the gardens now as well that we've added here the last few years, where you can see maybe a little bit older one if you take a peek through there too. Okay. So Pacific Rim, I asked him again this year, like, what's next? He won't tell me yet. So when I go down there in August every summer, I'll go beat down the door and see what I can find out, because I'm sure there's another one coming down the pipeline here pretty quick. All right. So I'm gonna hop to one thing I'll say, and I'll show you a few trees is, so who here has existing maples? We got quite a few. Yeah, everybody's like, I got both my hands up. So we got existing maples. So one thing, a question I get a lot is fertilizer. Okay, so I brought these two up for the class today. You got 20% off this food too at the register. Just tell them, and then 20% off all the trees will be nice too for a little discount today through next Friday. But this, to me, you know, if I use organic fertilizer, nothing is going to hurt a maple. Okay. But if I'm going to buy something specific for my Japanese maple, I'm going to gravitate towards this. They finally got a picture of a laceleaf there on the bag, which should kind of remind you. But I don't need a lot of phosphorus, potassium. I need some nitrogen to keep my maple happy. The growers, unfortunately, put these on liquid nitrogen. So when I get trees in, I'm like, holy smokes, that thing grew a foot last year. In my yard, it grows like 3 inches. So you'll see a difference in the growth habit, and we don't need to force feed these. We want slow and steady. That's the way I would always go with Japanese maple. So if I'm using this as a fertilizer, it's ideal. I've got like a 711 number, and I could broadcast this down once a year. If you haven't done it, do it now, but I would do it on my existing ones and my container specimens. I do the same thing one time, usually about the 1st of March. That's going to help me with foliage. I want a little more foliage. I'm trying to get a little more growth. I'm not asking it to grow crazy fast. It's not that. I just want a healthy foliage with good color. If I want the opposite, or I also want thicker branching, I'm going to go back and feed the same food one more time about the 1st of June. So I would have my growth with that first fertilizer, then I get caliper or branch thickness with my second one. So twice a year is plenty. You might not even have to do it that many times. I'll be honest, my pots always get fed. My new trees always get fed. Maybe for a few years. 5 years go down, tree looks happy, nothing's wrong with it. I'm not going back and dumping 10 pounds around my Twombly's Red Sentinel that I got 20 years ago. It's happy, the color's awesome, there's nothing wrong with it. I got good soil, I'm good with that. I don't need to feed it. But if I have an issue, I prune it hard, some case like that, then maybe I would go back and add a little bit of food on there as well, okay? The other thing, let's say you're buying one today, you know, for the existing ones, we're gonna do the spray, watch the spray, do the feed. If I'm gonna buy one today or add a new one, dig a big hole. Like we talked about with the verticillium, with drainage. I don't care so much about this, what's down 2 feet in the soil. You know, if I'm planting an old tree, I wanna have it forever. Maple should give you decades of enjoyment, not 5 years or 10. So if I have that clay layer, okay, do I break it up? Can I get compost in there? What can I do to help the drainage? Put in a French drain to get the water away from there in certain spots. There may be some areas they're just too wet. You know what? Like me, I'm not going to get a maple to grow here. I got to go to something different, and I can use a maple over there instead. So watch your soil, dig big holes, twice as wide, twice as deep always. Break all that native soil up. I got my pile on the side. I take compost. I got bag bale up here if you can see them. That's on special as well, 20%. Mix that with my pile, about 25%, maybe 1/3. We mix that up. That's my backfill. And then I always have that compost on the top for a little mulch, okay? You'll see all these maples are grafted. The only maple is the one that everybody asked me for class, called mini maples, grown by a seed. And I wish we could find some. They are totally out for the year. I don't know that there'll be any, maybe in the fall. But that's a little tiny bonsai guy almost. That's not one probably for a huge spot in the yard. But that's not grafted. Everything else I can look at, if I look at that ukigumo, I've got a rootstock, and then the scion wood is budded on here to grow the variety that we want. These are not started from seed. That's the only thing I can do wrong planting a new one, is bury that graft. I do not want to change the soil level at all. I put that in the ground. I'm not going to plant this as it is and then put 5 inches of mulch over it to hold my weeds and save my water. If I bury that graft, I'm going to bury my tree here in about a year. So I have to stay down to the same level. So that's why a lot of times, again, it's not planting it on an anthill, but a nice little gentle little mound to highlight the tree. Now I can bring my mulch in and cover that area, but I'm not going to get up the trunk too far, if that makes sense. Okay, is that kind of hitting everybody? All right, because that's a common thing. We get some gardeners come back after having one for years, say, man, this thing's just struggling. And a lot of times it's like, okay, we got to get the soil level down a little bit. We've let that mulch, the bark, whatever it is. That's a great thing to do. I would never say don't mulch, but don't get it up the trunk. We can do anything we want out around the roots, but when we get to the actual crown, we got to keep it that same level down the road. Okay? So let me go. Anybody got any questions?
I have a question.
What's that?
First of all, how much sun will that sentinel take?
Oh, hot all day sun. Yeah, you can have as much sun as you want on it. Yeah.
Secondly, I've got a bloodgood.
Mm-hmm.
It's really open, kind of like that.
Uh-huh.
Is that normal?
Yeah, bloodgood's a big, open, vase-shaped maple. Yeah. So if we went red, like she's asking about, you don't want no bloodgood, probably the most common maple. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a great color. But if we want red, which I think is a cool idea here, we got a lot of green in Washington, right? Everyone can admit that. We got fir, we got green, we got the evergreen state. So when we get something red in the landscape, that just pops, you know, especially at sun. So if we're looking for a red tree, she mentioned bloodgood. That's my tall one. If I want a big old 20, 25-foot specimen as it gets mature, big, huge maple, that's the way to go. If I want a little less, I go Emperor 1. Now I'm down there maybe 18-ish feet or so, full grown. Then we want to go another level down, we go Fireglow. That's our most popular tree we sell here. It would be more like 12 or 15 and a really nice thick mushroom crown. So that's kind of your reds. Bloodgood, Emperor, Fireglow goes down the bottom. Okay? Yeah, go ahead.
What is the
Yeah,
one
but
that
that's
far
a big
left
tree.
So let's go through. I'm gonna show you some of these
Okay,
because I brought some different stuff in here.
Okay.
So that is the most different one. So let's start with that.
I have one other question though before that maybe, is that's not a very big pot, it looks like, for the red one.
Yeah, they do them in boxes. No, it's okay. Yeah, we won't want to get that in the ground, or if we're not leaving it in there very much longer.
Oh, I see.
But yeah, they get them in like that. Yeah. So this is one we'll start with, so everyone can see that. So this is, some people call this Ryusen. I've seen it called Ryusai. This is a totally different creature for Japanese maple. When this came out, I'll be honest with you, I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know if it's really doing much for me because I just couldn't see how to utilize it. I put one of these in at my buddy's house a few years ago, and it is absolutely spectacular. So what we did was, this is one that's going to grow up to a certain point and literally just come straight back down. It's not a lace leaf. We don't have lace foliage on there. It's got regular Japanese maple size leaves, spectacular fall color, but I can do whatever I want to this. So what we did with his was actually took the branches up here and started training them. And we went over an arch gate into his backyard, and everybody comes there, it's like, dude, is that a Japanese maple vine? Like, that's what it looks like growing over the arch. So I could do whatever I want to reuse, and that's a fun one to grow. in the landscape, or frankly in a container would be kind of fun too. But everything that comes down is, if I don't prune this, I'm gonna hit the ground and start growing out like a ground cover. So every year, it's a little bit of prune up off the ground, kind of like a Laceleaf, but I could take this out and twist it and stake it and turn it. I could make a really fun kind of specimen piece with something like we're using. That's totally different than any of the other trees that we have around here.
We call it the cousin it tree.
Cousin it, I like that. There's a red one that's pretty close to that called dragon tears that we have a few of, and I think we could do the same thing now with the new dragon tears. That would grow like that, bigger red leaf, but the same thing, a little bit tighter weeping habit.
Dragon tears.
You can see the Mikazuki. If you come up after class, I think that might be the prettiest maple on the whole property this spring. But that's the crescent moon that we would have for morning sun or shade, and that's going to be that reticulated dark pink red with the darker veins in there as well. If I came and saw that in shade in the summer, it's going to be green with white. You know, totally different colors as we go through the season on the crescent moon maple. That's a great reticulated one. Like I showed you earlier, that's the Pacific Rim. So you can see the orange on that. That is unbelievable. I mean, I can't believe the color of that. When this came in, I thought, man, how many of those can you send us? Last year, nothing. This year, a whole bunch. The question on this one is always going to be, can you get me a smaller one? And that I cannot do. Isley's got the rights to this. Nobody else does. It's patented now. So we have ginormous 8-foot boxed ones out there and 6-gallon. There's nothing smaller than that. At some point, once in a while, they give me some gallons, and it's not that they produce them, but they maybe produced a little extra. So I'm the first one they'll call and say, hey, you're always bugging me for gallons. We got a few extra. You want them? Absolutely. Send them down here. So at some point we would get sometimes some little gallon starts, but it's just hit or miss. If you really want one of those, these are not cheap, but save some money over the box one if you want to watch it grow and get a 6-gallon. There's a few of these left today. We've sold most of them because they've been this color for the last few weeks. I do have a few more coming. My last of my stash is coming in from them this week on Thursday. So if you miss out today, leave your name on any of them you're looking for after class on our wish list, and I'll do my best to help you out, okay? So that's First Flame. You can see a couple. This is another totally different one. Can you see the color on that? So this is Manyo no Sato. And you can see this is the opposite of all other variegations, if you ask me. I have a red leaf with lime green variegation on it. That is totally unique, again, in the maple world that I've seen. It's not a huge grower. It's got beautiful foliage here, spring, summer, and fall again. But this one, again, for a pot or a small spot in the yard, it doesn't need to be in total shade. This would be a perfect one, again, for that half sun, half shade kind of day. And Manyo no Sato is again, this one stands out, totally different as far as the color. If you can see on the back, I won't pull that down, but can you see on the back there, that green one right here? So that's coral bark as an example, and I always bring up coral barks at this class because I think a lot of people might have Sengukaku, which is the giant one, makes a beautiful specimen, but I'm gonna get myself a 25-foot tree down the road, and some people I think buy a coral bark and picture this little cool bark color tree by their front door. This is a big tree. So we always have those, but I'm always trying to find dwarf ones, something that doesn't get as big. So we have a few good ones out there like Akakawa Hime. We have Little Sangu is a new dwarf one now. Or this is one called Corvallis Broom. Came down from the Beaver Believers here a few years ago. But Corvallis Broom would be a shrubby coral bark. So that's one that would be the opposite. I'm not gonna have this big trunk and a huge vase-shaped tree, but I'm going to have a thick bushy specimen with the same bright pea green foliage, with the same great fall color and the sweet bark in the winter. That's why we buy coral bark. Wintertime, leaves drop, I can look out and say, holy smokes, that's some sweet color wood out there. So that's a Corvallis Broom, but we have a few others up there as well that will fit the bill. We saw the Twombly's back there. Again, it's not columnar like we can do on some other tree specimens. But if I'm trying to get narrow and I want as much height as I can for, like I had, a tight spot next to the garage or the house that won't get into my siding, it's going to be Twombly's Red Sentinel for red, or we have a few of a green one out there called Sukasa Silhouette. and that would be the green version. Much narrower. I'm still going to get 15, 20 feet tall with age, but I might only eat up a 6-8 foot circle instead of having something 20 feet by 20 feet kind of thing. Okay. We looked at the peaches, the ukigumo, lion's head, little shishigashiras. We have big ones, small ones, medium ones, thin ones, tall ones, bushy ones, you name it. We got a bunch of lion's heads out there. This is another one I have in my landscape. Very different foliage, you know, looking for something cool and unique. This one to me almost looks like you bonsaied it or cloud pruned it a little bit without touching it. It's got different crinkled foliage, very clumpy growth habit. I think a really attractive old Japanese maples, the Shishigashiro or the lion's head variety. We've got Shindus Hojo. They're not quite leafed out yet. Did anyone read the article I had in the paper a couple weeks ago? The golfing gardener now, right? When it makes me laugh when I hear it. So this, the Shindus Hojo is still, after all these years, probably the #1 rated spring maple. They're just coming out right now with this fuchsia red color. When this fades into the summer, it actually gets reticulated, not quite as much as that, but I get a light green interior color with subtle variegation with this hot red tip growth. And then in the fall, we turn scarlet. This is the first tree I fell in love with 30 years ago when I ran whites. First maple I got in, it's like, you got to get some Shindus Hojo. So I watched this tree that year, and that hooked me for the last 30 years. So I walk out spring, I have this. I walk out summer, it looks totally different. I walk out fall, it looks totally different again. So this is one that's really fun.
Okay, for the Shindus Hojo, in the middle, as it ages, does it start to lose? Does yours lose some of that redness?
Shouldn't. No.
Mine is, I got one from Heronswood when it was 12 inches tall, and it's about 18, 20 feet tall now. But it doesn't have the same show.
Yeah, it might not have been Shindus Hojo, I hate to say, because I don't think the heights too. I take care of a Shindus Hojo now at the Arboretum I keep talking about. It's been there for dang near 40 years. A, it's not even nearly that tall, and B, it is unbelievably stunning every season with that same
pretty,
color.
Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
it does all the same things, but...
Well, you might have, like this, I've been trying to learn some Japanese over the years. I got a couple friends that have taught me some vocabulary. But if I look at Japanese, shin is improved. So a lot of times people that think they have Shindus Hojo have Des Hojo. And that's one we get asked for. I can't find anymore. But it might be Des Hojo because it's not quite as striking as Shindus Hojo. A little bit different. I bet you have.
I got it from
it was around before that was. We couldn't have this.
25 years old.
Yeah, I bet, and that would get bigger too. So that would probably explain it. I bet you have Des Hojo. Yeah, the original one. Yeah. Yes.
Are there any steps you could take to prevent Pseudomonas?
Copper would be #1. If I'm trying to prevent Pseudomonas, this is what my growers would do, and this is what I would do here. The only tree I worry about on our property is coral bark. So when we get coral barks in, I meticulously look at it and make sure I see no black anywhere, and then I get them with the copper spray when they come in during the winter. That kind of shields up. Okay, I feel more comfortable this is going to be okay. My growers do the same exact thing. I don't know that I would run out and spray every maple in my landscape. I wouldn't be a proponent of that, but I would say absolutely if I had a coral bark, I was looking to make sure it was okay. That's like a 1st of March thing. I'm out there with a microscope going, okay, do I have black anywhere I can see? If I do, it typically starts at the tip of the branch and works its way down. I'm gonna go black, skip a bud, and then prune out of there, get rid of that in the yard waste. It'll grow out with healthy growth if I get the copper on there to protect it from progressing. If I walk out and I have a big, huge black streak on my bark, I'm gonna have to cross the fingers and toes, and hopefully it has not traveled through the whole system. You might end up losing it if that's the
So
case.
it's on the main trunk.
Then cross the fingers and toes. The one thing I would do, and we should say this, if we're talking disease, Pseudomonas, verticillium would be the exact same discussion. If I had any question on any plant that I was talking about a vascular type tissue disease, sterilize your pruners, because that's the #1 thing. I could do whatever I want. That tree may live for 30 years and never crash, and I wouldn't rush to cut it down, but when I went to prune it, saw, blade, whatever, I am sterilizing those tools with some bleach, some rubbing alcohol, something before I go touch another maple, because that's how, to me, verticillium, no, but Pseudomonas, yes. That is how we're gonna go, oh, well, now that tree has it and that tree hasn't, because you're just taking that pathogen and moving it around the garden that way. Okay. So we talked about baby lace. Again, I'm always brutally honest in my classes. If you want a Laceleaf, give it room to grow. If you don't have that much room to grow a Laceleaf specimen, don't butcher it every year. They don't look right. I drive down past 2 of them here every day that just like, one of these days I'm gonna get out of my truck with my pruners and go knock on the door. Hey, do you mind if I come out here for a little bit and fix this tree? But I won't do that. So if I don't have the room, get a smaller one. Baby lace just came in. We got a bunch of these. This is a sweet little miniature tree with the dissected foliage. Or the other one will be the Scarlet Princess, or Ash's Scarlet Princess. A little more red if you're looking for red. This will give me a combo of the greens and the darker red in there as well. So those will be the 2 small ones. Yes?
On one of my maples, it branches, and at the fork, I've got moss.
Yep.
Is that a worry?
So moss. There's a great, moss, lichen, we can put all those in a bucket, right? So, you know, that's Washington, first of all. We get wet winters and shade, we're gonna have moss. I think it adds character, others don't. It's up to you. The problem is, yes, I can pick it off of there carefully or do what I can even get some potassium soap and carefully kill that little thing of moss without hurting my tree. It's gonna come back, it's not gonna go away. It doesn't cause a problem unless, again, if I had the crotch of a tree, typically it's with fruit. If I have that and I can feel soft wood, like it's rotting there, then we got a problem. Okay, I got to get something in there to seal that up to make sure we don't lose the crown. I would be shocked if it ever caused any issue with Japanese maple. Yeah, I really would. I think it adds some character, but again, it's up to you. I have some people that are like, I don't like moss, period. So if you do, the problem with moss killing is we can have success. We carry a bottle in there called Moss Max. So it's a natural potassium soap, doesn't stain anything, doesn't hurt anything. The problem is I can't put it on plant foliage. So if I walk out in December, January, February, or even early March before my tree leaves out, I could get out there and spray the trunk, do whatever I want, and I will not hurt the tree. I will kill the moss, the lichen, the rest of it. And then again, brutally honest, next winter, you'll have the same thing on there again. So it doesn't go away forever. Yes?
Do you expect to get any of the butterfly maples or matted?
We do. I have 2 gigantic ones. We have white butterfly, which is really cool with a lot of white in it. I have those in gallon up there. I do have some other medium middle ones. They weren't quite ready yet. I think they're telling me like into mid-May, early June. They just aren't rooted yet, and we'll have some more. That's one we always carry around. Yeah. Couple others here. So this is Benihime. You know, I'll be honest, I struggle with this class every year because I'm like, what weekend should we do it? It's one of my favorite classes. It's a popular one here at the nursery, and we get 120 different Japanese maples in, so it's important for us to have the maple class. If I did this in February or early March, we would be talking about ones that leaf out really early that are pretty cool. I waited later this year because I think everything is almost leafed out and you can see it all. Last year, I don't know, maybe 5 trees had leaves on them. We were looking at twigs everywhere, pictures on the TV, so we moved it up a little bit. But this is one of the earliest ones to leaf out. This is Benihime. I have one of these in a pot. I'll be honest, I would not put this in the ground up here. It's not a big grower. It is like Shindus Hojo on a little tiny miniature bush. It's a great maple, but it does not like wet. And it leaves out really, really, really early is my problem. And there's a couple others like this too. So we always have frost at some point later spring. This is gonna turn black if you have it in the ground. It's gonna wanna leaf out on the first few sunny days, late February, early March. Then you're gonna get a frost, it's gonna turn black, you're gonna have to prune it, let it leaf out again. So that's why I do a pot. Sweet, my late maples leafed out, I got in the container. Oh, we got a couple cold nights coming, sweet, throw it in the garage for a night or 2 in the pot. Bring it back out in the spring, good to go. So just be careful with Benihime. It's a sweet bonsai to play with too if you're into that. But it's a great little miniature one with sweet color. The whole thing is literally that color, you know, back in early March. Little tiny leaves, and then off we go for the season. It's a little miniature grower, but just gotta really watch the weather. This is one that leaves out pretty early. Rhode Island Red. To me, it's one of the better red ones. You're not a Rhode Island Red chicken, right? I have a couple people think, you selling chickens there? So Rhode Island Red is a great little, I wouldn't say dwarf, because these don't grow very fast, and a container growing that keeps them really small. I don't know the fire pit I had around here, that's my planter. I I took it home because I'm reclaiming it this year. But I had a Rhode Island Red in there for 10 years. The tree is literally only about that tall and that big around. If in the ground, I'd be a little bit faster. But this would be, you know, we talked about Blood Good and Emperor and Fire Glow and some good red ones. This would be kind of the opposite. I want something thick. I don't want it open. I don't want vase shape. I want a big, thick, bushy, almost like a mushroom red tree. That would be Rhode Island Red, you know, container or the ground. And again, for full sun, we can have all day sun on those. Some of the fun ones, I remember the first time I saw this one, I chuckled because I was like, now that's a clever name. So if I look at this guy, can you see all the cool colors coming out? I mean, I got yellow, I got pink, I got green, I got really cool flowers. This is a really fun one for part shade or shade. It's called eye candy, which I thought was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But they even spelled it better because you had to look at it twice like, what is that? It's eye candy. So it's like I-K-A-N-D-I-I. So you look at it and you're like, that's straight from, no, that's an American Japanese maple. It's someone called eye candy and got clever. So, but it is a fun variegated one. This is one we're able to get more and more of these days. And if again, container growing or a decent smaller spot in the shade garden, that would be a great choice for some foliage. You'll see some out there that are showing more reticulation and pink already. We've got a few of those around this year. This has been a little bit tougher one to find for us. Just got a couple more. So if we go back to a little green doesn't have to be too boring. So this is what we call the eagle claw maple, Kamagata. And that's a great little small tree for green. Really nice fall color too. But you can look at that, you can see the picture after class. Really nice structured tree for a small plant. We have a lot of people that love green, do this in a nice size container or a smaller landscape and get a beautiful little specimen tree that really doesn't ever overpower the garden. That would be a much smaller scale green Japanese maple. This one right here is probably the quintessential maple of all of them. Who has Makawa Yatsubusa? So if you like maples, this is the top of the totem pole. I think that checks every single box on the list for maple. Small structure, great color, awesome in the fall. This one's got very horizontal, interesting branching. You could really grow this. I don't know that I've ever seen one much bigger than me. Might get maybe 6 or 8 feet tall, 6 or 8 feet wide kind of thing, more of a large shrub. But that's got some sweet structure. We get a lot of Makawas in because I think that's a great beginner maple for people. They try it in a pot, fall in love with maples, and then we got another addict around here, right? So we put those in containers or a small spot in the yard. Don't have a Makawa, for sure get one of those. That is a really cool tree. We just missed the red. This is one that always is real lime green, but it's got a beautiful red petiole when those leaf out. You'll probably see a couple still leafing out there in the house that were later. And I would see that scarlet red with the lime green in the spring. Really, really nice spring color. That's a fun one. The last couple here. So I had to bring one of these in because again, look at the color of that. So this is a spring foliage maple. Looks good all through the season as well. This is one we can never get very many of. I might have 3 or 4 called I think this is Wilson's. Oh, this is Johnny's. Johnny's pink. We get Wilson's pink and Johnny's pink. So this is a decent sized tree, maybe 10 or 12 feet as it gets old, but I don't think you're going to get much brighter than that for spring foliage. That's got great color on it here for springtime. This is one again, morning sun, a little bit of afternoon shade would be ideal, or it's a perfect little understory tree to brighten up a little shade garden with the spring foliage. Okay. The last one here, we got another shade. Here's another pretty reticulated one. These just showed up finally yesterday in the nick of time. So this is Olson's Frosted Strawberry. So this is one here, I've got pink on pink almost. If I've got deep dark shade, again, a container tree is a great choice. It's not very big. If this was out when I planted my peaches and cream 20 years ago, I probably would have chose this one instead of that, but this didn't exist at that point. So this is another spectacular spring foliage maple that'll look like 3 different trees as we go through the growing season as well. Yeah, so you got shade garden, or the north side of the house, Olson's Frosted Strawberry might be a pretty cool choice for you too. The last couple on the ground here, we saw the Japonicum. You know, if I want to get a big old full moon maple, that would be our kind of specimen sized tree for that. Can you see the bright gold here behind? So that's one, again, I wish we could get more of. I do have a few more coming in June, but that's a really bright variety called Summer Gold. So it's the opposite kind of all the other stuff we talked about. You know, springtime certainly looks cool in the spring with a little tip color, but if I walk out in June, July, August and I have a Summer Gold, it's going to be a big grower, you know, big bushy grower, 15 feet plus again. But if I have a little sun on it, it's going to look bright golden yellow all through the summertime, which is different. If I have a little less sun on it, it's going to be the brightest lime green maple you have in your entire collection. That's a little different color again that I see on a lot of the taller upright ones. That Summer Gold's pretty sweet. The last one here, because everything we've talked about so far, Japanese maple. You know, Acer palmatum, the full moon maple's a little bit different. Breeders are getting a little interesting these days, and I'm seeing a lot of stuff where they take vine maple, our native maple, and they are crossing now with Japanese maple to get some different looks on trees. So we get a lot of these hybrid kind of vine maples in as well. I'm not going to walk out in the woods and find that growing native, so I'm not going to call it a native vine maple, but it enjoys the same conditions that we would have on our native stuff that we grow. Easy to do in Western Washington, multi-stems usually like our native vine maples are, and pretty manageable size. So there's 3 I brought up here just to kind of show you a little example of kind of some different ones. Now this is a new one we got in, a dwarf one called Baby Buttons. So if I look at that and this is leafed out, you would think, oh, that's a vine maple. Why is it so small? But this would be a miniature version. Again, I could grow in a pot or a small spot in the landscape and have that vine maple look with great fall color, but a really fun little dwarf variety right there. Then we would have something like Burgundy Jewel, which you can just see the first of the burgundy coming on here, okay? So this leafs out green like our native ones do, but if I walk out in the summer and I have this in sun, not shade, this whole thing is going to be burgundy. Like I'm going to have a really different foliage color on that vine maple than I would on our native stuff. So this to me would be just like our native vine maple and growth habit and everything else. All I've done is add foliage color in the summer. So that may be something to consider too. And if I want something different, I wish these were all the way leafed out because these are spectacular. So we get a couple of foliage vine maples in. This is one called Sunny Sister. So if I'm watching this leaf out, I'm going to have peaches and yellows as we get to the spring. That's reticulated, so I'm going to have variegation on the foliage in the summertime. And then again, same great fall color and the same growth habit like I'd have with our native one as well. You'll see a couple others out there too, but we're really trying to get in some fun varieties of vine maple as well, because that's another, again, Western Washington native. We can find some kind of cultivars of it to add a little bit of interest. They're pretty fine. You might look out today and think coral bark. We carry a bunch of one called Pacific Fires. Anyone have one of those? So that's our native vine maple with coral bark wood on it. So that's another choice a lot of people really enjoy in the wintertime because they've got that added bark interest there as well, okay? So we got maple overload. So if, and again, I'll get questions here in a sec. So we got some time for questions, but again, if you got sunshine today, man, I'd listen. We always watch the weather around here, fancy that. But it says we're in for a pretty good spring here, like a little warmer than normal, a little drier than normal here for a few weeks. I know next weekend is sunshine again and up and add 10 degrees to it, so I'll be ready for my shorts by then. We'll have the white legs going for class next Saturday. How's that? So we've got a lot of stuff around. Sales on, like I mentioned, you got 20% on all maples, period. You simply tell her at the register you were at the class today, you suffered through Trevor's hour talk, you got 20% as your reward. So you can put that in there. The compost, we always have as buy 4, get 1 free special. You guys got buy 3, get 1 free if you need some compost. That's always something, not just for maples, but for the whole yard. And then like I mentioned, the superior Japanese maple food, that tree shrub, I had her put that on special as well, 20% if you need a little bit of fertilizer to get the trees happy here for the spring, okay? So we got any questions? We had one.
You mentioned that these maples have been drafted.
Yep.
I have volunteers coming out, so I throw them in 1-gallon pots. Are they going to make it? Am I
wasting
my time?
No, we get in. That's a great question. So we asked about, we call this Sumera, we always call them helicopters, right? Watch the little seeds helicopter down, they find a spot in your soil and they propagate. I got them all at my house too. So the problem is with seedling is the majority of the time we don't get the same tree as we did with the parent. We're going to get variation. So what we call those is actually seedling maple, and there's nothing wrong with them at all. I have a guy on Whidbey Island, he hasn't brought them down yet, but we'll have about 50 of them here pretty quick. They're way, you know, if I'm charging $50 for a grafted collector variety, you're going to pay like 15, 20 bucks for a seedling maple. Much cheaper. They grow a little bigger, typically, but there's nothing wrong with them at all. If you get them propagated, you'll have them forever. Yeah, I've done that same thing. Throw a couple in pots. And sometimes that's how we find a new variety. Somebody starts a bunch of seed and they're like, whoa, wait a minute, what's that? Then we can pull it aside. If we can get a consistent scion or graft off it, we've got a new variety of maple as well. Yeah. So usually our seedling maples, we will classify as green or red. But then within that, if I put 50 of them here at a table, every single one of them will look a little bit different. Yeah, different size leaf, a little bit smaller. This one's got more cut in it. They're all a little bit different. Yep. Yes.
So we purchased a Eskimo Sunset
Yeah.
maple for my brother.
Yeah.
And it was doing really well. And then last year he got, it was like something bored into it about halfway up the trunk, and there's definitely just a real big bore hole,
Yeah.
and everything up above that has died.
Died.
So
Go.
can he salvage that? Can he cut the top
Cut that off. You
and-
probably got borers. It's actually a little insect that looks like a drill hole, and then it
Yeah.
tunnels underneath the bark.
Right, right.
Once he tunnels around the circle, he cuts off circulation. You lose that branch. You
Oh,
see it a lot
the
on
whole top
birch.
of the tree.
Yeah, see a lot on birch around here. So have him pop that out, and he might want to call an arborist. You can't buy it, or he can as a homeowner. They've got a syringe. They would actually come inject that tree with a systemic that stays underneath the bark, and it would knock out the borers. Yeah,
My Eskimo Sunset's about 40 feet tall
40
now.
feet, big old platinus. We got.
You planted at it.
There you go. There you go. Yes.
How long can you keep them in a pot?
Well, again, I go for 10 years for me, or pretty close to that. That's a hard question to answer, honestly, because it's going to be what variety is it, how big of a pot do you have, and how much, where are you growing it in. There's a lot of factors to that.
So if I
But
have a 50-gallon pot
oh yeah,
that I got up at Stuber's,
Yeah.
I just took some old, fence
yeah, yep,
things, made an enclosure so it looks like a pot.
nice.
And it's this okigumu, it's about 16 feet tall.
Yeah,
But I don't have a room to, it's
Plant
so
it.
heavy, I
Yeah.
would have to take planks and shove it out into
Yeah.
the woods and back, and
That's
where I'm
it.
really not supposed to plant things.
yeah.
I had to do that.
So if we're talking about pots, longevity, now that's a huge pot, and I could probably grow some trees in there for darn near ever. If you got 50 gallon, that's big. But what I would always do, because I'm in the same boat, I don't even want to tell you how many pots of maples I have all over the yard. So every single late winter, I walk around all of them. Now I know I just did that last year. I didn't have to worry about it. Anything that's older, it's not looking at the pot. I take my fingers, I go to the edge. So I'm gonna right inside the edge. I'm like, okay, what am I feeling here? Am I feeling a solid root? Okay, maybe I got to start doing something with that the next winter. Or I would say the other thing would be watering. If I'm out there watering in the summer, you can tell when it's just going right through the container. There's nothing but root left, and I don't have much soil in there. Okay, that's another red flag. I got to do something the next winter. So is it, that's going to be a big project to try to replant that, obviously. But typically for me, it might be, I do, the biggest stuff I have is probably 30-inch big thick glazed ones, and they're not light, and I'm not moving it, but I can tip it over, I can slide my tree out, I can score the outside, chop a little bit of surface fruit off, pack some fresh soil in, and replant it. I'm good for a few more years, kind of thing. Yeah. So I would start by probing the outside of that big container and seeing if you're feeling like nothing but root system. And if that's the case, was it okay last summer?
Yeah, it's done well. It's done really well. It's the one
Yeah.
that's getting. I have a cotonoito, and it outgrew the pot like you're talking.
Yeah,
outside.
yeah.
And so I had another one that I had to move out of there. 'Cause it
See,
was
that's
too
me.
big,
You
so I
just shuffled
pushed
your
it. So
containers. That's
pushed
what
it
I
in the
do.
woods, and then I put the cotonoito in there. But
Yeah.
then I had the ukigumo, but
Yeah.
it's the one that. Otherwise, I'm going to have to start trying to prune.
Yeah.
Very, very selectively.
Yeah, roots. And again, I would go back to last summer. If you watered it adequately last summer and it did not look tired, I do not think you're root bound, and I think you're okay still. It would, to me, that would be an August, probably the month of August thing. If you're like, God, it's looking really tired, I'm getting brown, I know I'm watering it like I always have, and it's not soaking it up, it's probably, again, not enough soil left to hold the moisture. Yeah.
Okay, and then my last question is, I know you keep saying don't put a a Laceleaf where you don't want it to grow.
Yeah.
But they like this part of the world.
Yeah.
And I mean, at a certain point, in order not to sacrifice the shape, I have to prune.
Yep.
A quarter, almost
Yep.
20% or a quarter
Yeah.
off of one.
That's okay.
That keeps coming out into the driveway.
Exactly.
But it's probably 12 feet across now. It's
Big
gotten
one.
so big.
Yeah.
But it, you know, if it gets too big, is there somebody I could get to buy that off me and replace it with a little one?
Oh yeah. Oh, you could
Really?
call a place, man, like a place like Big Trees out in Snohomish, a
'Cause
place that
in the fall
specializes.
when I mean, it is
Oh,
stunning.
they would get thousands of dollars for
It's
something like that for
stunning, but
moving.
it's just
And you can, and again, you can prune, and you may have to prune hard, and it may look pruned or butchered for the season, but you know it always regrows.
I
Yeah.
prune it. I've had to prune it every year. For the
Yeah,
last
that's a
5
winter. That would be a winter thing to dig it up. And if you're really serious about it, I'd contact the company because either A, they should give you some money
Oh yeah.
as part of it, or they bring you a suitable replacement
that's
that's
what I
decent
would-
size, and then either way you come out fine. So.
But I think it's the Tamukiyama, the old red.
Oh, yeah, that's the bigger
Tamukiyama,
one, too.
and it,
Yeah.
It grew out of the place I had it, so I moved it thinking
Yeah.
I'd be safe. No, I'm not safe.
Yeah. Yes.
You have Purple Thunder, and does that work in shade?
Purple Thunder would be okay for part shade, part sun. Unfortunately, that's one of the ones he zeroed me out the last minute. So we will get it in eventually because that's one that was on my list to collect too. So I'm motivated. So leave your name because as soon as we get those in, we'll call you.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a sweet tree. At the last minute, I had a few. My guy's like, I'll be honest, it was the winter. And it's not that it's a bad tree or less hardy, but when I'm trying to graft little seedlings and I'm having them in a nursery and we get down in Oregon, they got down into like 5-6 degrees for that whole week. I was 9 in Everett. It just killed some plants. So I think those might have gotten the winter death on them. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So you said, wanted to confirm what you said, is that you could put the shade-loving
Uh-huh.
ones under the fir that's been limbed.
Oh yeah, that's a perfect spot for that.
And even though it really seems like it doesn't get hardly any.
Oh yeah, if I go for golden full moon, I get reticulated, highly variegated ones. Absolutely, that's where they would thrive.
Great.
Plus, you would brighten it up. I mean, you really would.
Then my ferns could go under.
Exactly. Yeah. Plus, I'll be honest. I like the idea of underneath the evergreens because it's the one place to me I don't worry about the drainage as much. That
Well, exactly.
fir soaks up the extra water. I don't have to worry about it. Yes, I got to water it, especially when it's young, because that dead fir is going to steal most of your water.
You dig that big a hole.
Yeah, and that's going to be the other issue is finding a pocket where I don't have the roots to get through. Yeah. You got any more?
Yeah, man.
All right. Well, thanks for coming in. If you want to go.